Camping and hiking has been one of the most popular pastimes for decades. There is no better way to leave behind the stress of your everyday life and reconnect with nature. But as today's stories are going to illustrate, sometimes maybe we get a little too close to nature. Lucas was a Boy Scout. And even though he'd earned his Eagle Scout a couple of years earlier and wasn't really active with the Boy Scouts anymore, his Boy Scout troop needed a couple more leaders for a camping trip. So he decided to help out and take the troop down to the Antietam National Battlefield. Now, Antietam is a battlefield in Maryland that has the distinction of being the bloodiest day in Civil War history, where on September 17th, 1862, over 23,000 soldiers were either killed, wounded, or missing after 12 hours of savage combat. But Luke had grown up outside of Gettysburg, so ghost stories about Antietam didn't bother him at all. There was enough weird stories about Gettysburg that nothing else really fazed him. Now, this was kind of a big weekend for the Boy Scouts, as they were having other troops come in as well. They're all coming down to the battlefield for a Civil War weekend, full of Civil War education, reenactments, and some troops pranking other troops. Now, all of the troops were camping next to Antietam Creek on the other side of Burnside's Bridge Road, the part that isn't the park. Now, the second night that they were there, all the troops pretty much hit the hay pretty early, mostly because they'd been made to march all day due to an overzealous reenactor. Now, it was pretty easy for anyone to cross the road and walk up onto the battlefield and up to Burnside's Bridge and along the creek where the Union soldiers had massed and tried to cross that bridge. So after dinner, Luke decided to take a little walk over by the bridge and check out the sun as it's starting to set and head towards night. And he was struck by how beautiful that setting sun was over the battlefield and the creek. And he got up to the bridge and he started walking across it, when he felt an excruciating pain in his chest. He just about doubled over in pain as he grabbed his chest. And he's thinking, am I having a heart attack? But no, because both of his arms feel fine. It's just the sharp pain in his chest. And as he's got both of his hands on that part of his chest that hurts, he all of a sudden feels another sharp pain, this time a little closer to his shoulder. And when that pain struck, it knocked him over and he just about cracked his head open on the side of the stone bridge. He laid there for a few minutes freaking out until he could get up and he booked it back to camp. When he got back to camp, he found another scoutmaster to take a look at the spots on his chest. And all they could see were 2 red welts where those sharp pains were, and it looked like they were maybe turning into blood blisters, like he'd gotten hit with something. And the scoutmaster asked what he'd been doing, and Luke told him what he'd been doing, that he'd just been walking around on the battlefield. But not once did Luke ever think about haunting or anything like that. He just called it an evening and turned into bed for the night. Now, the next morning after breakfast, the troops were scheduled to meet with a park officer at Burnside's Bridge. Luke's troop and about 4 other ones were standing on the battlefield facing the bridge where the park official was detailing the history of the battle. And once the park official started talking about the bridge, Luke's ears kind of perked up, and he found out that Confederate sharpshooters had taken up positions on the other side of the bridge. And the side where they were all standing was the side that the Union soldiers had all massed up, getting ready to take that bridge. And as they would come up, they were just getting picked off left and right. Now, the Confederate soldiers lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 men, but the Union lost over 15,000. No Union soldier made it past the halfway point of that bridge. And after hearing about the fate of all of those Union soldiers, that other scoutmaster looked at Luke, and they both wondered what the hell happened the night before. Lance and his friends had a nice 5-day weekend off of school and decided to go camping in the woods in northern Georgia. They packed a 10-person tent for the 5 people in the party, 2 guys, 3 girls, and loaded everything up into his buddy's truck. Now, Lance and his buddy, Todd, both had experience out in the woods camping and hiking and hunting, and Todd was actually an Army vet. So they knew what to pack and had all kinds of amenities like a camping stove, propane grill, fold-up cots, portable shower. They were in it for the whole weekend. They left Wednesday afternoon, parked the truck in a small town, and started hiking to find a camping spot. And it was a fairly normal hike until about 4 or 5 miles in. The first time they noticed something strange was when they stepped into a big clearing that had a big pond or a tiny lake in it. When they stepped into the open area, everything stopped. No birds chirping, no squirrels running around. Even the clouds and the wind seemed to have stopped. So Lance and Todd are thinking, there must be a predator nearby. And they both pulled out their handguns just in case. And Lance says he's never seen a bear in Georgia, so he was thinking maybe it was a mountain lion or maybe some coyotes. Now he and Todd are looking around the edge of the clearing when Todd grabs him and nods over to the other edge of the lake. And Lance looks over and sees what appears to be a woman standing at the waterline. She was maybe 150 yards away, and they assumed that she must live in the area. So they just kept walking past the clearing. And as they headed into the woods, Lance looked back to where the woman was, and she was gone. And the sounds of the forest returned as they got deeper into the woods. So they made a campsite about 2 miles later, as it was kind of starting to get dark, and they didn't want to get stuck trying to set up camp in the dark. They got everything all unpacked, set it all up, built a fire, popped a couple of beers, and sat down to hang out. Now, Lance was interested in one of the 3 girls on the trip. So, after a few beers and some flirting, the sun was down. They snuck away from the fire under the pretense that she needed his help setting up part of the tent. They start fooling around, and after a few minutes, she stops and looks at him kind of funny. Lance asks her what's wrong, and she says, nothing, it just got really quiet. So they both got dressed really fast and headed back out to the fire. And the others hadn't noticed anything strange, didn't mention anything except joking with them that it took them a long time to fix that tent. On the first morning, they discovered that the propane stove had been left on but not ignited, so it had gone empty overnight. None of them had used it. The second morning, they discovered that some things had gone missing. A lantern that they'd left outside by the fire was gone, along with Lance's crush's sweatshirt that she had left on a folding stool. But they just figured they were just misplaced, or that somebody had just used them and not put them back. Friday, their second full day, they were hiking trying to find a waterfall that they saw online was supposed to be in the area. They were following the river upstream when everything went silent again. Todd nudges Lance while they're walking and points to the top of the hill next to the river. And Lance looks up through the trees and is just barely able to make out the figure of the same woman, same clothes and all, just standing there. And he couldn't tell if she was looking at them or not, but she was just standing there. So Todd tells the girls he thinks he sees a mountain lion. He's going to go scare it off. So he goes scrambling up that hill, making all kinds of noise, and comes back down about 10 minutes later. And then he tells the girls he scared it off. And then he tells Lance that when he got up there, the woman wasn't there anymore. They found the waterfall, and the guys were able to put the weird woman out of their minds because the girls decided to go skinny dipping. After having a little fun, they hike back to camp only to discover that their camp is a mess. It's not totally trash, but it's clear that something had gotten into their stuff. So Lance and Todd tell the girls it's probably raccoons, but they both take their guns to bed with them that night. That night, Lance remembers waking up to the girl that he's crushing on squeezing his arm. And as he opened his eyes, she hushed him before he could ask what was wrong. There's complete silence all around the tent. And as Lance looks around the tent, he sees that Todd is also halfway up, kind of looking around. So they both stayed awake for the next 2-ish hours until the sun started coming up, and they packed up all their stuff and headed out. Now, the entire hike back to town was eerily silent, and there were a couple of points where Lance actually saw the woman through the trees, but he couldn't get a really good look at her. They avoided the lake completely and got back to their truck in what seemed like about half the time that it took them to get out there in the first place. After they were safely on the road back home, Todd and the girls all start telling each other about all of these times that they had seen or heard this woman all weekend, but were too freaked out to tell anybody about it. Like maybe she would just go away if they ignored her. And the wildest part was that no one could describe her face. It was like it was blurry. This incident occurred when Patrick was going to school in Arizona. A group of his friends wanted to take him out exploring. Now, he grew up in the Bay Area of California. He was a city kid through and through. He had never been camping. And the only time in his entire life that he'd even seen snow was at the top of a mountain about 50 miles away from his house. So there are 6 of them in total, Patrick and 5 friends, and they are heading to the Mogollon Rim from Tempe, Arizona. And they'd left Tempe about 5 a.m. And this was not a day trip. These guys had packed tents, food, water, everything that you can think of. And Patrick brought his .45 with enough ammo for a just-in-case situation. After about 5 hours, they finally get there, and Patrick is in awe. The smell of the fresh air and the view of the mountains was amazing. 2 of the guys started setting up camp, so Patrick decided he was going to just check out his surroundings a little bit. And one of the guys told him, don't go too far. And he agreed, but he also had his .45 with him just in case. But he just walked around the woods for a little bit. He was walking for about a half an hour. And he was just about to sit down on a rock and feel the cool water when he saw a black flash out of the corner of his eye. But when he looked up, there was nothing there. No noise, nothing. And he thought to himself, well, maybe I'm a little tired from the drive and maybe I should get back to camp. So he gets back to camp and relaxes for a while. And about midnight, he and his buddies decide to go hike to the rim. So they grabbed their canteens and they took off. And at this point, one of the guys mentioned the Mogollon Beast. And Patrick thinks to himself, here we go. And one of the other guys asks, what's that? And the first guy says, well, it's like a Bigfoot creature. And they all kind of laughed. And Patrick says, well, I'm protected, as he pats his .45. And the guy says, that's not going to stop it. And Patrick says, well, if there's a Bigfoot charging at me, this will at least stop it. And they all laughed and continued their trek. And Patrick realizes he has some business that he needs to attend to. So he walks off about 50 feet to find some trees to attend to his business. And as he's standing there, a pebble about 2 inches wide hits him in the knee. Now, his first thought is that his friends are just messing with him. So he zips up and walks back to the group. So as he's walking back, he picks up a few small rocks, and as he gets closer to his friends, he starts pegging his friends and saying, you want to play games? And his friends are like, what the hell? And Patrick says, while I was peeing, somebody threw a rock at my leg. But they were all about 50 feet from him. So for them to have thrown a rock to hit him in the leg, they would have had to chuck it pretty hard. But the rock that hit Patrick's leg was not thrown from that far away. It wasn't thrown very hard. And no one was around him. They were all by the rim. So Patrick's second thought was, WTF? So Patrick suggested that they all go back to camp because he was getting hungry. And that is when all hell broke loose. As soon as everyone got up, a roar came from the forest to the right, like a lion roaring at a zoo. It was one of those guttural T-Rex kind of roars from Jurassic Park. So Patrick pulls his .45 out and starts walking a little faster. Right then, a rock about the size of a basketball flew about a foot away from his friend's head. Then, about 4 or 5 branches, about 2 inches around, 6 foot long, were lobbed at them from behind the bluffs. At that point, they all start running. Patrick was actually the last one. He turns around, lets off 5 rounds, and starts running. They all got to camp and started packing up their stuff. And their friends asked Patrick what he was shooting at. And he said, I was just shooting at the air, trying to scare it off. They must have had their whole campsite packed up in 15 minutes. And they start piling into their Jeep. And as they're getting in, Patrick takes one look back. And right at the tree line, he sees an 8-foot black Bigfoot. It just stood there, watching all of the guys pile into the Jeep like scared ants. And Patrick stood by the back of the Jeep. He just stood there. Half of his brain wanted to shoot at it, and the other half wanted to talk to it. He was just fixated on it like he was in a trance. He was about 30 feet away from it. And he said it felt like it was just him and the creature. And he could hear his friends yelling at him, but it was just like muffled background noise. And he can remember wanting to say something to it like, I'm sorry that I shot at you and scared you. But his trance was broken when one of his friends grabbed him, shoved him in the Jeep, saying, there's the Bigfoot, let's go. And when he got in the Jeep, Patrick looked back out the back window and it was gone. That was in 1992. And not only did Patrick never go back to the rim, but to this day, he has never gone back in the woods. But even now, in his late 40s, Patrick will tell you that he knows what he saw. What he saw was a man, a tall, hairy man with gentle eyes. Now, if you have any spooky or scary stories that you would like to share, please email us at inbetweentales@gmail.com. But first, make sure that you click on these links right here for more scary, true camping and hiking stories. And we will see you again on the In-Between.